the whole enigma of alien abduction experiences. You sent us a fascinating set of sources, historical bits, key cases, researcher viewpoints, different explanations.
Yeah, and it's a topic that's, well, it's got this strange duality, doesn't it? On one hand, you have significant skepticism from, mainstream science about whether these are literal events.
Right.
But on the other hand, the people reporting these experiences, they often describe genuine, really lasting psychological trauma. And it's important to remember, many of them are psychologically quite normal individuals.
Absolutely crucial point.
Yeah.
So look, our goal here isn't to say definitively, yes, this happens, or no, it doesn't.
No.
What we want to do is really unpack the core elements you find in these abduction stories. We'll look at how they've sort of evolved over time, dig into some of the really big cases that shaped how we think about this, and explore the ways people have tried to understand it all, psychologically and culturally.
Sounds good.
Okay, so where did these stories even come from? These really bizarre, often quite frightening accounts.
That's the place to start, definitely. I mean, the image we have now, the alien abduction linked to UFOs, that really takes off in the mid-20th century.
Yeah.
But the basic idea, non-human things taking humans,
Yeah.
that goes way back. Jerome Clark actually calls them paleo abduction, these older stories that have some striking similarities.
Paleo abductions. Oh, okay, like what? Can you give an example?
Sure. There's an account from 1896, a Colonel H.G. Shaw in California. He reported that he and someone else were basically jumped by 3 tall, skinny figures covered in this sort of downy hair. Said they tried to kidnap them.
Wow, 1896.
And then, fast forward a bit, early to mid-20th century, you start seeing people wondering if these new flying saucers might be involved in disappearances. Leroy Thorpe wrote an article in '53 called "Are the Flying Saucers Kidnapping Humans?"
Right, the question was out there.
Exactly. And Harold T. Wilkins, in his '55 book, Flying Saucers Uncensored, he also mentioned people vanishing after claiming alien contact. So the idea was kind of bubbling up.
So the seed was planted, but when did we get those really detailed, often pretty terrifying accounts that feel like the modern abduction narrative?
Mid-20th century is really the turning point. The case of Antonio Vilas-Boas in Brazil, 1957, that's a huge one. It's one of the earliest really detailed accounts.
What happened there?
He described being forced onto a craft, having medical type things done, like blood samples taken, and this is a really disturbing part, a forced sexual encounter with a female alien.
Whoa, okay.
And what's really notable there is how early that reproductive theme shows up. It becomes a major, often scary element later on.
Yeah, that is disturbing, and it does seem to echo through later accounts. But I think for a lot of people, the case that really blew the doors open was Betty and Barney Hill in 1961.
Oh, absolutely. The Hill case is often called the prototypical abduction. The bright light, the missing time they couldn't account for later.
Right, the missing time.
And then Betty's nightmares, which came out later under hypnosis, really disturbing dreams of being examined medically by these beings we now call grays. Short gray skin, those huge dark eyes, small features.
Yeah.
That story just captured the public imagination and really laid down the blueprint for so many others.
And the hypnosis sessions with Dr. Benjamin Simon, they brought out even more, didn't they? Really distressing details.
They did. Barney recalled this painful exam, a needle stuck in his abdomen, taking a sperm sample. Betty remembered similar invasive stuff, plus that famous star map she said they showed her.
So, essentially, the Hill story codified it all. The missing time, the grays, the often invasive medical exams, and recovering these terrifying memories through hypnosis. That became the template.
Exactly. And then John G. Fuller's book in '66, The Interrupted Journey, and that 1975 TV movie, The UFO Incident, they pushed that deeply unsettling story out to millions, solidified it in pop culture.
Of course, there were skeptics then too, right? Offering other explanations.
Oh, yeah. People suggested the light might have just been Jupiter, that the missing time wasn't really noticed until much later. Even Dr. Simon, the psychiatrist who did the hypnosis, initially thought Betty's memories were just elaborations of her dreams.
But that skepticism didn't exactly stop the flow of similar, often terrifying stories, did it? The 70s onwards saw a real surge.
No, it didn't stop. That period saw the rise of researchers like Budd Hopkins, David Jacobs, John Mack. They really started framing abduction not just as weird one-offs, but potentially something widespread, systematic.
Right.
And then came Whitley Strieber's Communion in 1987. For anyone reading that at the time, myself included, it felt like a real jolt. It cemented those terrifying images.
Yeah, I remember that cover. That book, with those vivid, really visceral descriptions of his encounters, and that iconic gray alien face staring out.
Yeah.
It did feel like it hit a nerve culturally. The fear felt very real.
it absolutely left a mark, shaped how a lot of people visualize these encounters, probably. It's interesting, some SOT camera phones might make claims drop off, but the phenomenon, as a cultural thing, it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worth noting how the story has changed. Earlier ones may be less tech-focused. Post-WWII, you get more advanced ships, more focus on science, biology, especially reproduction. That evolution from maybe more human-like figures to the grays probably says something about our own changing anxieties, maybe about technology, the other.
And that concept of missing time became such a key feature, almost like a diagnostic sign, right?
Totally. Budd Hopkins' book in 1981, Missing Time, really pushed that front and center. It created this sort of loop. You have a gap in memory, you start wondering if it was an abduction, maybe you undergo hypnosis, recover these often frightening details, and that just reinforces the belief.
Okay, so we've seen this historical arc with these specific, often deeply disturbing cases really shaping the narrative. Let's dive into a few of those key ones. Villas-Boas, we mentioned. What else was striking about his account, maybe setting the stage for later themes?
Well, besides being so early and detailed, his story was really notable for that strong sexual focus, the idea of alien-human breeding. And this was before the gray archetype really took hold.
Right.
He described humanoids, the medical exam with gel and blood samples, and then that forced sexual encounter with this. Well, he described her as a striking female humanoid. Weird details, too, like communication using barking sounds.
Barking sounds, okay.
And afterwards, he reported physical symptoms, nausea, weakness, skin lesions. It paints a really unsettling picture right from the start. That physical aftermath, the fear, the violation, it's a grim aspect.
Definitely grim.
Yeah.
Then there's Travis Walton, 1975. That one's still so debated, partly because of the alleged witnesses, right?
Precisely. His forestry crew supposedly saw him disappear, hit by a beam of light. He reappears 5 days later, fragmented memories, terrifying ones.
What did he remember?
Waking up in this sterile, hospital-like room, seeing the grays, fighting them off in fear, then seeing more human-looking beings in helmets, someone putting a mask over his face, then finding herself walking on a highway. It's incredibly dramatic.
Hugely controversial.
Hugely. Skepticism about money, the timing right after the UFO incident movie, conflicting polygraph results. It's still fiercely debated.
And the Copley Woods abductions, the ones Budd Hopkins investigated, they really pushed that disturbing hybridization theory forward, didn't they?
They really did. The experiences Kathy Davis and her family reported, which Hopkins detailed in Intruders, were absolutely central to popularizing that unsettling idea.
What kinds of things did they report?
Alleged multiple abductions over years affecting different family members. Detailed, invasive gynecological exams on Kathy. Reports of missing pregnancies. And then these profoundly disturbing accounts of being shown what were supposedly hybrid children. Interactions encouraged. It solidified Hopkins' view of a long-term breeding program.
That's deeply unsettling stuff. Which brings us to Linda Napolitano, the Brooklyn Bridge abduction. The claims of multiple witnesses there seem almost impossibly bold.
It's a very strange and audacious case. The core claim itself is extraordinary, floated out of a 12th floor window by a blue beam into a UFO examined by grays.
Yeah, standard abduction fare, almost.
But the witness claim is what makes it unique. Not just one witness, but multiple independent ones. Security guards with a politician, maybe even the UN Secretary General Pérez de Cuellar.
Seriously, over the Brooklyn Bridge.
That's the claim. An abduction in such a public, visible place, it's staggering. And of course, hugely controversial. The witnesses' veracity, whether they even existed or corroborated the story, that's all debated. Parallels to a sci-fi novel from the same year fueled skepticism. And there was just recently a lawsuit against Netflix about it, so the controversy lives on.
These cases definitely highlight the core themes, often frightening ones. So let's break down the anatomy of a typical abduction, these common, often terrifying threads people report. The capture first.
Right, the beginning. Often starts with a sudden sense of dread, like something is wrong. An altered feeling, the Oz factor, some call it. Reality feels unreal, distant.
Strange lights.
Missed, often, yeah. And then paralysis, that's a big one. This terrifying inability to move usually happens right before or during the initial phase.
And where does it supposedly happen?
Frequently from the bedroom, often in that hazy state between sleep and waking. Then the transport, described in surreal ways. Levitation, a beam of light pulling them up, sometimes even moving through walls or windows. Total loss of control, intense fear.
And once supposedly inside the craft. What's that environment like?
Descriptions are often pretty consistent. Metallic, sterile, clinical, like an operating room or a lab.
Cold, unfeeling.
Very much so. Curved walls, this diffuse light source you can't pinpoint, not much equipment visible except what's being used right then. Alvin Lawson, a researcher, even suggested parallels to birth imagery, womb-like rooms, doorways like cervixes.
Huh. Interesting.
People sometimes recall specific areas. Examination rooms, obviously. Control rooms with views of space. Even engine rooms with humming machinery, lights, maybe described as crystals or rotors.
And the technology?
Always advanced beyond us. That diffuse light, screens showing weird patterns or sometimes terrifying scenes like Earth's destruction. Yeah, and telepathic communication is very common. Skeptics, of course, point to sci-fi influence or maybe hypnagogic imagery, those vivid things you can see or hear when falling asleep or waking up.
Okay, but the examination room.
Yeah.
That seems to be the absolute core,
Yeah.
the most detailed and often the most terrifying part.
Yes, overwhelmingly, that's the focus. And the procedures, they often center on the reproductive system, but also the head, nervous system, skin, joints. Less focus on, say, the heart or lungs below the neck or the upper abdomen, interestingly.
What kind of procedures are we talking about? These sound awful.
They do. Biological sampling is common. Blood, often taken from weird places with strange tools, skin scrapings, saliva, hair, and very disturbingly, sperm and ova harvesting.
Oh, God.
Cranial procedures too. Pressure on the head, needles in the scalp, sometimes the nose. Descriptions of drilling, sometimes with a burning smell, which one researcher suggested might be cauterization. Ear probing pressure, heat, needles, lasers. Nasal probing with long needles. No speculum, one researcher noted. That sounds like a biopsy.
And implants. People talk about implants.
Yes, alleged insertion of small metallic spheres, nose, head, hands, legs, feet, often followed by nosebleeds. Some extreme accounts even describe the skull cap being removed, brain procedures with needles. It's truly horrific stuff.
It sounds like torture.
The gynecological focus is pervasive too. Reports of artificial insemination, then later fetus removal, phantom pregnancies, cysts, all feeding into those hybridization theories.
What about the tools they supposedly use?
Often described as needle-like things, scalpel-like devices, maybe pencil-sized, emitting light, making bloodless cuts that heal fast. Three-pronged syringes, large lenses or devices put over the eyes, sometimes inducing altered states or paralysis, restraints, straps, bars.
And the physical feeling, just pain.
Ranges from discomfort to extreme pain and terror, yeah. Pressure, burning, tingling, coldness, that terrifying paralysis again. Though, oddly, some report that an alien touching their forehead can sometimes calm them down or reduce the pain.
But the focus on reproduction, it's just relentless in these accounts.
It really is, and the psychological fallout is immense. PTSD-like symptoms are common. Whether you believe it's literal or not, the reported trauma is often very real. It taps into deep cultural anxieties, doesn't it? About creation, fertility, bodily integrity, losing control, genetic manipulation.
It absolutely does. So who are these beings doing these terrifying things, the abductors themselves?
The most common are the grays. That's the image everyone knows. Small, 3 to 5 feet tall, gray skin, that big pear-shaped head, no hair, tiny chin, huge black almond eyes, slit mouth, hardly any nose or ears, slender, frail body, 3 or 4 long fingers.
What do they wear?
Simple tight suits or robes, often gray or blue, sometimes described as naked, their behavior, usually clinical, detached, emotionless, communicating telepathically, like workers just doing a job.
Where did that image come from, primarily?
Traced back mainly to the Hill case, then massively popularized by Strieber's Communion. Some theories try to explain it psychologically. Stephen Novella suggested the features trigger associations with intelligence. There's even the mother hypothesis. Big eyes, big head resembling a newborn's view of a mother.
Are there other types reported?
Yes. Nordics, tall, human-like, fair hair, blue eyes, attractive, often seen as more benevolent, communicative, maybe supervisors. Then reptilians. Scaly skin, green or brown, slit pupils, yellow or red. Often described as malevolent, aggressive, controlling. Linked to conspiracy theories, like David Icke's shapeshifters. The Herbert Schirmer case from '67 is often cited as an origin point for this type.
Any others?
Insectoid or mantis-like beings, sometimes seen overseeing grays. Tall, thin figures. More human-like ones in uniforms. Barney Hill saw Nazi-like ones. Travis Walton saw ones in helmets. Even reports of little blue men with big heads, though that came from a lucid dream experiment.
The gray description feels like such a potent cultural image.
It does. Maybe a projection of our feelings about intelligence, the future. Big head means smarts. Dark eyes mean inscrutable. Frail body means maybe they've moved beyond physical labor. Or maybe it's a warning. Advanced but unsettling. humanoid, but alien.
And their motivations. Why do all this scientific study? Something more sinister.
Motivations vary depending on the account and the researcher interpreting it. Scientific study, yes. That genetic hybridization program is a big one, especially for Hopkins and Jacobs. Maybe for their own survival, maybe creating a new species, maybe even colonization or infiltration. Jacobs leaned towards the infiltration angle.
That sounds pretty scary.
It is. Other accounts mention planetary concern, warnings about the environment, nukes, society collapsing, maybe long-term surveillance, like Jenny Randall suggested, resource acquisition, colonization. Hopkins got pretty alarmist about that, or even spiritual development, which John Mack focused on.
Different motives for different types, maybe?
Possibly. Proponents point to the consistency of craze as evidence. Skeptics say it's cultural contamination from sci-fi, communion. The variation in types and motives does suggest cultural factors are at play. The researchers' own ideas probably shape the interpretations too.
The hybrid encounters you mentioned. That's a particularly disturbing element, being shown children.
Deeply disturbing, yes. Central to Hopkins and Jacobs, also documented by Mack, women reporting missing fetuses, then later being shown infants or children with mixed features, frail, pale or gray skin, underdeveloped, those large alien eyes but with human aspects, sometimes iridescent eye color described.
What are the interactions like?
Holding them, feeding them, playing. Telepathic communication. The emotions reported by abductees are intense and conflicting. Confusion, deep sadness, loss, but sometimes connection too.
And Jacobs talked about hybrids.
Yeah, his idea of hybrids becoming more human-looking. Abductees supposedly tasked with teaching them human behavior to integrate them. It's a core part of his infiltration theory. Skeptics naturally see fantasy, suggestion, maybe misinterpreting deep emotional stuff about parenthood or loss.
Communication seems key too, mostly telepathic.
Predominantly, yeah. Direct thought implantation, sometimes verbal in the abductee's language, maybe with an odd accent.
And the messages. Warnings seem common.
Very common. Environmental destruction, pollution, nuclear war, collapse often with vivid, terrifying scenes shown. Prophecies too, though usually vague, unfulfilled. Explanations for the abduction, why they were chosen, apologies for the fear, but rarely clear answers about origins or agendas.
Any other types of messages?
Task assignments gather info on human emotions, society, spiritual messages, interconnectedness, sacredness of life, growth, especially in Mack's work, information about the hybrid program and insurance policy, revitalizing their species. The messages often reflect our own anxieties or maybe offer the abductee a sense of purpose. Tone varies hugely, dire to hopeful, sometimes matching the researcher's focus.
We talked about missing time. The altered states alongside it must add to the strangeness and the fear.
Absolutely. That missing time is the classic red flag. But the altered states are key too. That Oz factor, unreality, detachment, muffled sounds. The paralysis, terrifyingly common at the start or during exams. Floating, levitation sensations.
And memory issues.
Big time. Fragmented memories, lost time. Maybe due to trauma. Maybe, as claimed, alien intervention. Then there's the idea of screen memoirs. False or distorted recollections, maybe implanted or created to cover the gaps. It all makes the experience feel surreal, hard to verify.
And connects back to psychological explanations.
Exactly. Sleep paralysis fits the paralysis and hallucinations. Dissociation could be a trauma response. False memory syndrome is real. Dream reality confusion. It's easy to see how missing time could lead to suspicion, then hypnosis, then recovered memories, reinforcing the belief, potentially constructing the narrative from cultural scripts.
And finally, those less common but significant parts. The tour, the conference, theophany.
Right. The tour being shown the craft, engine room, crystals, rotors, control room, space views. Usually after the exams, maybe seen as a courtesy. Living areas rarely mentioned.
The conference.
Also often after the exam. Maybe the aliens seem more relaxed. Discussions happen. Aliens asking about human emotions, lifespan, society. Or giving vague explanations, task assignments, warnings, prophecies.
And theophany. That sounds different.
It is a profound mystical or spiritual experience. Intense love, peace, oneness, gaining wisdom, a broader worldview, a spiritual connection or purpose. Mack really emphasized this. Visions of alien philosophies, even religions. It adds complexity beyond just science or malice. Fits with other anomalous experiences.
So these intense, terrifying reports on one side. Then the investigators trying to make sense of it, but bringing their own perspective.
Definitely. Budd Hopkins, the artist-turned-investigator, really became the father of the abduction movement. His books Missing Time, Intruders, Witnessed set the stage.
What were his core ideas?
Missing time as the indicator, a systematic long-term genetic program, impregnation, fetus removal, hybrids, abduction as analogous to rape, an apocalyptic view, abductions running in families. His method was hypnosis, support groups, investigations like Copley Woods, Linda Napolitano, hugely influential on public perception.
Then David Jacobs, the historian.
He built on Hopkins, but went darker. Secret life, the threat. More insidious view. Covert infiltration via hybrids, these hybrids learning to blend in for eventual control or takeover. Very ominous. Also used hypnosis, interviews, a dire conspiratorial take.
And John Mack, the psychiatrist, offered a different angle.
Completely different. Abduction, passport to the cosmos. He argued abductees were sane, experiences were real, maybe interdimensional, focused on transformation, spiritual awareness, environmental concern, dual identity, noted physical marks, saw aliens as maybe concerned about Earth, hybridization as an insurance policy.
How did he work?
In-depth clinical interviews, hundreds of them, sometimes hypnosis, looked at group sightings like Ariel School. He brought academic credibility, but massive controversy. The Harvard inquiry reaffirmed his freedom, but noted concerns. He really highlighted the psychological, emotional, spiritual impact.
Others were involved too, right?
Oh, yes. Arleo Sprinkle, psychologist, convinced of reality back in the 60s, linked it to cattle mutilation, thought he was abducted, lost his university job. Thomas Bullard, folklorist, analyzed hundreds of accounts, found consistent narrative structures, looked at it through a folkloric lens, and Whitley Strieber, the novelist, whose communion was massively influential as an experiencer account, detailing those terrifying encounters, popularizing the gray image.
So different schools of thought emerged among researchers.
Clearly, Hopkins-Jacobs, alarmist, physical reality, genetic programs, infiltration colonization. Mack, transformative, spiritual, planetary concern. Their backgrounds and beliefs definitely shaped their conclusions, meaning gets co-constructed.
And huge controversy surrounding their methods, especially hypnosis.
Massive controversy. Hypnosis is the big one. Critics like Elizabeth Loftus stress it's unreliable for accurate memory, prone to confabulation, creating false memories and suggestibility. People can incorporate cues, weave fantasies.
But the researchers defended it.
They argued for its unusual validity in this context, but the scientific consensus is memory is reconstructive, easily distorted. Hypnosis generated detailed stories, sure, but opened them up to huge criticism.
Other criticisms.
Researcher bias leading subjects, selective interpretation. Mack's Harvard inquiry highlighted concerns. The community was quite close-knit, raising issues of confirmation bias. The lack of unambiguous, verifiable physical evidence is a constant problem. Debate over whether interpretations of alien motives were justified by the accounts.
And the media's role. Best-selling books, movies.
Can't be overstated. They disseminated and standardized the tropes. Missing time, intruders, communion, fire in the sky, the UFO incident. Huge impact. Creates that potential feedback loop. Media shapes interpretation. Interpretation shapes memory, especially under hypnosis. Investigators themselves become agents shaping the phenomenon through their work and public profiles.
It's incredibly complex. Okay, shifting gears again. What about psychological and cultural explanations for these experiences?
These offer important alternative frameworks, looking beyond literal extraterrestrials. Sleep paralysis is a major one.
Explain that connection again.
Sleep paralysis, you wake up or are falling asleep and you can't move or speak. It's temporary, but often comes with vivid, terrifying hallucinations, seeing things, hearing things, feeling like you're moving.
How does that match abduction reports?
Very closely sometimes, feeling a presence in the room, intense fear, buzzing or humming sounds, strange lights, pressure on the chest, the old incubus idea, feeling like you're floating or levitating.
And the content of the hallucinations.
That seems culturally shaped. In the past, maybe demons, witches. Now, for some, the alien abduction narrative provides the framework to interpret those bizarre, frightening sensations. So, sleep paralysis plus cultural narratives could be a key factor for some reports, a neurological, psychological basis.
What about memory itself beyond hypnosis?
Memory is reconstructive, not a perfect recording. It's vulnerable to distortion, suggestion, false memories. Loftus's work is key here. False memory syndrome, believing strongly in something that didn't happen.
And other psychological factors.
Some studies link abduction reports to higher fantasy proneness, vivid imagination, blurring fantasy reality. Not mental illness, but maybe leads to extraordinary interpretations. Dissociative tendencies too. Difficulty telling dreams from dream-reality confusion. Lucid dream experiments even showed prompting alien dreams led to abduction-like experiences. These factors could combine. Sleep paralysis sensations plus pre-existing beliefs plus cultural narratives plus maybe suggestive therapy, a detailed believed abduction narrative. No deception needed.
But the distress, the trauma people report, that's real, isn't it?
Absolutely. Many report genuine distress, PTSD symptoms, anxiety, depression, insomnia, nightmares, flashbacks, isolation, fear. Hopkins called it post-abduction syndrome, though it's not a formal diagnosis.
Some report positive changes too, though.
Yes, Mack highlighted this. Increased spirituality, interconnectedness, environmentalism, purpose. The trauma is real subjectively, but doesn't automatically validate a literal alien cause. The distress could stem from misinterpreting intense internal experiences. It demands empathy and support, but also caution about literal interpretations. It's a therapeutic tightrope. Validate the emotion without necessarily validating the literal cause.
How do these modern stories fit into wider human storytelling, folklore and myth?
They fit surprisingly well. They have consistent patterns, themes, like traditional myths. Bullard found that 8-episode structure. You see parallels to older tales. Fairies, elves, demons, incubi, succubi, being taken away, otherworldly realms, missing time, strange ordeals, sexual encounters, hybrids like changelings.
So the core theme is ancient. Taken by powerful non-humans, returned changed.
Pretty much. The explanation just shifts with the times. Supernatural then, technological now. Alien becomes the modern agent for uncanny experiences. Technology replaces magic. Maybe it reflects modern anxieties. Technology, loss of control, bodily integrity, genetics, the unknown. Terry Matheson called it a new myth in the making. Human-like aliens with understandable motives have a certain social compellingness.
And the media's role in building that modern myth.
Huge. Can't separate media from the narrative's development. Early sci-fi like Invaders from Mars had similar themes. Maybe Twilight Zone episodes prefigured the gray look. Those key books and films we mentioned were pivotal. That feedback loop. Media influences interpretation. Interpretation influences memory. Sensationalism plays a role too. The strong correlation suggests cultural scripting is happening, challenging claims of purely original experiences.
So a mix of psychology, culture, media, maybe suggestive therapy, all interacting. But what about the physical evidence people claim? The scars, the implants, that's always brought up.
Yeah. It is. It's a persistent, very contentious part. Abductees and some researchers see it as proof, but scientifically it hasn't really held up under scrutiny.
What kinds of things are claimed?
Unexplained scars and marks are common scoop marks, cuts, burns, rashes, lesions, often on body parts recalled being examined. Proponents say they're results of alien procedures. Skeptics point to ordinary injuries, forgotten bumps, skin conditions, reinterpreted later.
And the alleged implants.
Small foreign objects supposedly found in the nose, head, sinuses, hands, legs, feet. Claims are made about advanced functions, telepresence, mind control, biotelemetry. Cases like Betty Andreasen, nasal, one of Mack's clients, wiry object from nose. Linda Napolitano, nasal lump suggesting prior implant. And Roger Lear's surgical removals are often cited. Lear claimed unusual properties, radio waves, magnetism, odd materials.
Any other trace evidence?
Very little credible alien biological trace. Sometimes clothing damage, torn, stained, environmental traces, scorched ground, weird vegetation patterns. The Trans-en-Provence case in France, 81, is often mentioned UFO landing traces like burnt residue, compressed soil. But that's seen more as UFO landing evidence, not direct abduction proof.
What have scientific investigations found when they've looked at this stuff?
Largely mundane explanations. Implant analyses usually identify common materials: iron, aluminum, glass, plastic, carbon fibers. Joe Neckel argues they're just ordinary embedded objects people forgot about. Analyses of Lear's objects found common elements. His claims of meteoritic links were questioned. Claims of weird properties generally haven't been backed up by peer-reviewed studies.
What about ground traces?
Often explainable by natural causes or hoaxes. Even the Trans-en-Provence investigation faced criticism later, suggesting tire marks might explain things.
So no smoking gun.
Essentially, no independently confirmed, unambiguous proof. There was that Novia offer for independent testing of implants, reportedly not taken up. Even a pro-abduction physicist at MIT acknowledged the lack of independent scientific evidence. Believers often counter that advanced aliens would erase all traces.
Which is hard to argue against, right?
Exactly. It's a self-sealing argument. Absence of evidence becomes proof of alien capability. Difficult to falsify. For believers, the perceived evidence, the personal connection they feel to a scar or lump, often carries more weight than lab results. The interpretation, filtered through belief, is key.
It's important to distinguish between maybe UFO traces and direct abduction evidence on a person.
Crucial distinction. Overwhelmingly, abduction claims rest on testimony, not the kind of physical proof that convinces the scientific community.
Okay, last big area, the global picture. Is this mainly a Western thing, or do you see it elsewhere?
It's most prominent in the West, especially English-speaking countries, the US particularly. But you do find analogous experiences, similar stories across cultures.
Similar elements.
Yeah, common threads pop up, otherworldly presence, mind control feelings, repressed memories coming out, sexual or reproductive themes. But the details vary hugely based on culture. The core experience, maybe linked to something like sleep paralysis, might be universal, but how it's interpreted and told, that's shaped by local beliefs, folklore, anxieties.
Can you give examples of variations?
Sure. The alien types. Greys dominate North America. Tall Nordics seem more common in UK reports. South America sometimes has more bizarre, monstrous beings described. And the interpretation. Anglophone accounts often heavy on terror, violation. But some resilient accounts, maybe influenced by spiritism, describe pleasant, even healing encounters with spiritual space surgeons.
What about indigenous cultures or historical folklore?
Indigenous cultures often have traditions of star people going back way before UFOs, Hopi, Cree, Zuni. Reports of interactions continue. Lakota holy man Wallace Black Elk described a vision quest encounter, telepathy with little people, often a more diverse view of alien intentions. Academics have noted parallels between modern abductions and historical Native American captivity narratives capture journey transformation, though modern reports are mostly from white Americans. Historically, European folklore is full of parallels. Fairies, elves, demons, incubi, succubi taking people, missing time, strange ordeals, sexual stuff, changelings. That core theme of being taken by powerful non-humans is ancient.
Even sleep paralysis gets interpreted differently.
Massively different. That chest pressure, sense presence. It's the old hag in Newfoundland, shamanic spells for Canadian Inuit, vengeful spirits in Japan, a female demon in Nigeria. Same basic physiological experience, totally different cultural explanations.
What does the research say about cross-cultural narratives?
It's still developing. Bullard found that core structure in North American reports. Matheson noted a shift from friendly to sinister aliens over time, maybe reflecting societal fears. Psych studies show varied correlations, demographics, beliefs. One linked it to early abuse, but others found no major psychopathology difference. It's complex.
So the core experience might be universal, but the story we tell about it is cultural.
That seems likely. Paralysis, sensed presence, strange beings, altered states may be linked to sleep paralysis or similar phenomena could be cross-cultural. But the interpretation, whether it's fairies, demons, or aliens in spacecraft, that depends on the local cosmology, mythology, technology level, folklore. The alien is maybe just the latest culturally resonant explanation for these deeply unsettling human experiences.
It's fascinating how these modern accounts seem to echo such ancient themes. Okay, as we wrap this up, it's undeniable that alien abduction is just incredibly complex.
It really is. You've got sincere testimony, real psychological impact, these intricate cultural stories that change over time, and then persistent scientific skepticism, all tangled together.
And despite the lack of that conclusive physical proof science demands, these narratives just have this enduring power, don't they?
They absolutely do. They hold a powerful place in our collective imagination.
It feels like understanding it really needs insights from everywhere. Neurology for the experiences, psychology for memory and belief, folklore and sociology for the cultural roles, philosophy for the human need for meaning.
Exactly, a truly multidisciplinary puzzle. And maybe the fact that these stories persist the way they evolve tells us something really important about ourselves, about our fears, our hopes, how we try to make sense of our place in this huge, mysterious cosmos, regardless of whether aliens are literally visiting bedrooms.
That's a really powerful thought to end on.